Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today the basis of this video is going to be wood finishes. I'm going to show you all different finishes. There's hundreds and hundreds of different finishes you can apply to wood, but I'm going to show you 12 or 15 of the most common, right from basic shed and fence paint right up to fine waxes. So stick around and we'll go from the most sort of basic and sort of paint on and right up to the highest quality finishes. So let's get started. Okay, so the first finish that I want to try out today is good old shed and fence paint. So I've got two pieces of wood here. I've got one bare untreated piece, and I also have a pressure treated board, and I just want to compare the finish. I think everybody's familiar with shed and fence paint. It's available at any DIY store. This is a slightly more unusual colour. It's normally brown or green. I just want to coat both of these just to see if there's any noticeable difference between the bare untreated timber and the treated. So this is the pressure treated board. I'm just going to put quite a heavy coat on. Most of these other finishes don't really call for a heavy coat, it's more carefully applying them, but this one, especially if you find painting fences and sheds quite monotonous, you probably want to slap it on as quick as you can. So I don't know how much, especially cheap shed and fence paint, how much it really does for the wood. It certainly imparts colour. I don't know how much it does in terms of actually protecting the wood. You can let me know your thoughts in the comments. So I'm going to leave both of them to dry now, and we'll move on to our next finish. Okay, so the next finish is something a bit similar. This is it's called Forget Me Not. That's the name of the colour. It's from the Cuprinol shade range, and it's basically, as you'll see, it's a sort of a blue colour, and it's actually opaque. I put far too much on the brush there, so I'm just going to spread that out a bit. It's very, very watery, so don't be alarmed by that, though it's supposed to be like that. And it's opaque, meaning that the grain will show through the paint. This is certainly a bit more water resistant. This is oil based, so it's more water resistant than ordinary shed and fence paint, which is mostly water based. So again, we'll leave that to dry. It's very good for furniture, sort of like garden tables, garden benches, wishing wells, things like that. Now we move on to having this bowl, which is called Creoseal, which is a creosote substitute, or creosote as we say in Scotland. And basically that's just, it's sort of like shed and fence paint, but it's an oil based version. And I can just show you what that looks like. It's very, very dark in colour. So I've got a piece of a fence post here. I'm just going to show you. It has, if you're familiar with the smell of traditional creosote, or creosote, it smells basically exactly the same. It's quite runny, so maybe not as protective as traditional creosote was, but certainly better for the environment. If you give it probably 3 coats though. You know, wait a good 24 hours for it to dry, and then apply another coat, wait another 24 hours, apply another coat. That should be good for 2 or 3 years at least. It is a little bit more expensive than shed and fence paint, water-based shed and fence paint, but I think it's well worth it because it certainly does protect it much better. The only drawback is obviously the colour. Not everybody will like this sort of dark brown colour. There is a light brown version available as well, which is a bit better, but if you're looking for greens and browns and greys and things, then probably try and find an oil-based shed and fence paint. Okay, so the next one, unfortunately I was unable to do anything with because it's been lying in the shed for too long, and it's supposed to be wood care oil, universal oil, but it's got the consistency of akin to scrambled egg now. So that's just, that can't be used for anything. Now we move on to varnish, which I've got a very light coloured piece of plywood here. This is actually yacht varnish. You can get many different types of varnish, floor varnish and coloured varnishes and all sorts, but this is just clear yacht varnish, and you'll see creates a very high sheen. Whenever you're applying varnish, just try and keep the brush strokes going in one motion from end to end of the piece. Don't be sort of dabbing it like this. And if you see a spot that's not been done, then just carry on regardless, and you can get it with the next coat, because it's not. You might actually make it look worse by trying to fill in a bit that you've not done previously. Okay, so that brings me straight on to the next one, which is furniture and cupboard paint quick drying. This is very, very effective at covering even things like MDF, which are porous. This is get very good coverage with this. It is quite expensive. This particular can was bought in Wilkinson's. It is quite expensive, but very, very good coverage. It just goes on like ordinary paint, and it's very easy to apply. Well worth the money in my opinion. This would be great for if you were wanting to recoat kitchen cabinet doors, for example. You could do it with this, no problem. 2 coats and it would be like a new door. Okay, so now I want to move on to a fairly specialist type of paint. That is chalkboard paint, which is essentially just black paint that is used for making chalkboards. So all you do is buy a can of this. You can buy water-based or oil-based. Oil-based is probably better. You do need to give it quite a few coats, but you just get a piece of MDF or plywood or any sort of sheet material and apply several coats. And once you've done so, you will be able to use that just like a chalkboard, so you can write on it and rub the chalk off. Next finish is also quite a specialist finish. This is metallic silver, which essentially is used if you want to make wood look like metal. So as you can see again, just apply it and it gives it this metallic look. Obviously if you want to look like metal so much, you would just use metal. There's no point in really trying to make wood look like metal too much, but again, these do need several coats. You can probably still see some of the wood grain through this, but that's just because it's only the first coat. After 2 or 3 coats, that would be a lot more metal looking, although it doesn't look too bad at the moment, to be fair. So now we move on to waxes and stains. So just going to turn this over so I've got a clean surface. I have a piece of zebra wood here, or zebrano as it's sometimes called, and I've got what's known as Bree Wax or Bree Wax, and this is a very high quality, high sheen wax that contains beeswax, which is partly why it's called Bree Wax. And as you'll see on a high quality piece of wood, all we do is rub the cloth into it a little and rub it onto the wood, and it will produce a high quality sheen. Very effective wood finish. Rub it in using a circular motion to begin with, and then finish off straight like so. And this is not water resistant or anything, this is just to provide a high sheen. This is for high quality basically bench joinery, such as boxes and cabinets, tabletops, things like that. The next thing I want to show you is worktop oil. And worktop oil, I'll just show you on a piece of hardwood, since worktops are nearly always made of hardwood. So worktop oil, as the name suggests, is designed for worktops and chopping and cutting boards. So you shake the, this has already been shaken well, you shake the can well before use, and you just get a clean cloth and just dab some onto the cloth and just apply it. This doesn't give much of a noticeable finish. It will sheen a little, but its main property is that it's food grade, so it's suitable for applying to wood that's going to be in contact with food, such as chopping boards, and even wooden cooking utensils such as wooden spoons, rolling pins, etc. could be coated with this. So I don't know whether you can see that on camera, but that's basically what worktop oil looks like. Again, should have minimum of 3 coats initially, and then probably coated maybe every 6 months thereafter. And on this same piece of timber, I'm now going to show you Danish oil, which again is it's not ideally water resistant, but it does give a good sheen. This is great for pieces turned on a wood lathe, such as I was making spurtles recently on a wood lathe, which is basically a Scottish porridge stirrer. And if I just dab my cloth in, you will see certainly has a much higher sheen than the worktop oil, but please don't use this for food. It's not suitable for food use. It's only for aesthetic looks. and you can give this as many coats as you want. You could apply 10 coats of Danish oil if you want. I don't think there's any need to apply more than maybe 4 or 5, but you can apply as many as you want, and it'll keep producing a nicer grain and a nicer sheen. Which takes me on to the next one, which is teak oil. This one's in a spray bottle, and we simply just spray it on. A couple of nice sprays, and this one is a bit more water resistant, so this can be used outside. It can be used for garden furniture, and as you'll see, it's got a similar sheen to Danish oil, but is a lot more water resistant. It's actually designed for outdoor furniture and basically, as I said, wishing wells and things like that, bird tables. If you don't want to apply paint, if you don't want to paint over the nice grain of the timber, then you can just use teak oil. So continuing with this piece of, this is a piece of red Meranti, sorry, should have said that. So we're testing all our finishes on red Meranti at the moment. And the next finish we have is actually wood dye. So this is not transparent, this is American walnut wood dye. So it's a way to make essentially a cheaper wood look like a more expensive wood. And of course the grain will never be the same. You can never fully make one wood look like another, but you can certainly get the colour fairly similar. And this will dry slightly darker than you see it just now. Walnut usually is a very dark timber, so if I was to apply 2 or 3 coats to that, that would indeed look like the colour of walnut. Right now it just looks like quite a decent piece of sort of like Brazilian mahogany, which is similar to what we have. Red Meranti is a mahogany substitute, but that has brought out the grain and it's made it a lot more brown coloured, and it looks a lot more like mahogany now. So despite even the fact that it's American walnut wood stain, it's actually made a sort of cheap mahogany substitute look like real mahogany. So I think that's probably a good thing. Now we have another type of varnish here, and this particular varnish is dark oak. Again, this is to make wood look like a wood that it's not, so we're now trying to get dark oak out of red Meranti. Impossible in practice, but in theory you can make it look fairly similar. And this gets applied with a brush. Not too heavy, just nice and gentle strokes. And even if it doesn't look like the finish on the tin, it's still a different type of finish, and this particular finish is highly weather resistant. This will last for years outside, assuming that you give it initially 2 or 3 coats. This will last a long time. Nearly all outdoor paintwork and varnish etc. needs to be upkept. So what I mean is, if you paint it 3 times or varnish it 3 times and then leave it for 10 or 20 years, there's a good chance the wood will still begin to rot, because wood has got a finite lifespan. However, if you upkeep that every year or so, there's a much better chance that it'll keep the wood in good shape. So that's us finished with the red Meranti. And I'm going to come back to my piece of plywood. Now, I think everyone is familiar with this finish. That is white gloss. So white gloss is used interior of a house everywhere. It's used on doors, door frames, facings, skirtings, architraves, banisters, spindles. It's used covings, cornices. It's used everywhere. It's not so commonly used in benchwork joinery. So, but I'm going to show you it anyway. So, as I say, I think we all know basically what white gloss is like, but just to show you, white gloss is extremely good for covering up imperfections in the wood, unlike most of the other finishes that we've talked about, which really bring out the wood. Gloss is more about covering up imperfections really, which is very handy if you have skirting boards that are slightly out of line, or the corners don't quite match up, or you know, door hinges that are perhaps even there's a bit of rust on the hinges or something like that. You can just paint over it and it'll cover it up for a while. Maybe not an ideal solution, but certainly a handy one. And last but not least, is simply spray paint. So spray paint has a lot of uses. It can be used for probably metal work as its main use. Can be used on wood as well if you want to paint wood a particular colour and you want to get a really good finish, because the fact that you're spraying it on means there's no brush marks. As long as you don't let it run, just spray a nice even coat and don't hold the can too close to the workpiece, and you'll get a nice even coat with no runs, no brush strokes. So just going to shake the can a little bit, make sure the surface is clean and dry, and hold the can about 8 or 10 inches from the piece, and use this sort of motion as you're spraying. Don't spray in one place or you'll create spots. So that's spray paint, and as you can see it's a fairly uniform coat, but again it'll probably need 3 coats, I would imagine, 3 coats at least. Good for metal, good for wood. Has a variety of uses and eliminates brush stroke marks. So that concludes our video today about wood finishes. Okay, so before you apply any finish to wood, it's very important that you make sure the wood is clean and free of dust so that the finish is not affected. So I've got 4 different cleaning solutions here. We've got methylated spirits, white spirit, isopropyl alcohol, or rubbing alcohol as it's sometimes called, and white vinegar. And I'm going to test out all 4 of these to see which one works the best. You can also give me your opinion down in the comments, and we will test out all 4 of these. I have this mock piece of pine here that I've sanded prior to finishing, and I can take a brush, a hand brush or a paint brush, and brush off most of the excess sawdust and dust and debris off of the wood, but some very small particles of dust will remain. So we're going to try out firstly methylated spirits. See how well this gets rid of these very small particles, which are very difficult to see, but I can see just with my finger that there are still small bits of dirt and things there. So I'm going to just dab a little bit of methylated spirits onto the wood, and this should act as a cleaning solution. Going to move slightly further along. I'm now going to try white spirit. White spirit usually wouldn't be recommended on light coloured wood because it will leave an oily residue. If you're finishing it with oil, that's okay though. If you're going to be applying an oily finish to the wood, like Danish oil, teak oil, linseed oil, tung oil, etc. So white spirit, I'm just going to put a little knife blade mark here so that we know where the methylated spirit stops and the white spirit stops. White spirit's also called turpentine. Now we move on to the isopropyl alcohol, which is just applied by spray and then rubbed in again. Isopropyl alcohol is great for many model makers use it for cleaning plastic components before gluing them together. Plastic components such as model railway buildings, etc. It's a very common use for isopropyl alcohol. Just going to put another saw blade cut here. And finally we have white vinegar, which is a good all-round cleaner, very effective rust remover. And they all look identical, they're all clear and transparent. Practically no difference at all visually. But I'm going to let them all dry and see if there's any difference. Once they've dried, I'm going to apply a finish to this piece of wood and we'll have a look and see if we can see. Okay, so now our piece of wood is perfectly dry. I don't know whether you can see this on camera, but the white spirit is clearly, as we suspected, left a sort of oily film here. It does stand out from the other three. The white vinegar looks like there's nothing on it at all, as does the isopropyl alcohol. The methylated spirits is there's a slight oily film to it, and there's a very noticeable smell where the methylated spirits is or was applied. But the white spirit looks as if this oily film looks as if it may slightly deter a finish. So I'm going to use some Colron wood dye here, and I'm going to apply this to the whole length of the wood, and we're going to see what effect it has on these four cleaning solutions. Already I can see that the white spirit appears to be repelling this finish slightly. It is still going on, but just going to get a fresh cloth to continue. Isopropyl alcohol doesn't seem to have any problem taking the finish at all, and the white vinegar seems to be very similar. So to conclude, what do I think is the best cleaning solution for wood before applying a finish? Well, methylated spirits appears to be fairly good, apart from the smell. There is a very distinct smell. Even with the smell of the finish that we applied, you can still smell the methylated spirits over that, which would probably dissipate in time, but not so good in the short term. The white spirit, probably not a fan of that, because it, as I say, it did leave that oily film, and it does appear to have repelled the finish somewhat. And I guess you could try and wipe it dry before try and completely wipe it dry before actually applying the finish, but seems a pointless thing to do because you are using it to clean the wood. So I feel that the two best ones in performance was probably between the white vinegar and the isopropyl alcohol. They both seem to work very, very well. They are both natural cleaning solutions, so they're used in everyday cleaning, so I think either one of those would be very suitable, but I would probably be careful with white spirit for cleaning wood. So that concludes the video today. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.